Following Sunday's win over the Timberwolves, one without Jimmy Butler in the lineup, many fans think this team can continue winning without their best player in the lineup. But is that realistic? We'll break down the possibilities on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day, and we've got a jam-packed show for you on this Tuesday morning. Group stage of the NBA Cup begins tonight. We've got a refresher on the format and what the Heat can learn from their big mistake in last season's in-season tournament. Plus, we'll talk about changes to the starting lineup. But first, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Heat newsletter. Within that newsletter this morning, we do have a written refresher on the NBA Cup format, everything that the Heat did last year and what they could do going ahead in the NBA Cup this season, as well as a Jimmy Butler injury update. But we're going to start today's show by talking about Jimmy Butler. The Heat got their first win over a team with a winning record this season on Sunday without Jimmy Butler. And David, all over Twitter and in our comments section, you see people saying the Heat are better off without Jimmy Butler and that they should trade him. Trade him now. Get started. They're better off without him. What do you think?
Well, I noticed it as I was watching the game. And at first I thought, you know what, there is a stylistic difference to the team when they're without Butler. They're pushing the pace a little bit. They're trying to move the ball a little bit more. The ball isn't held as often by a player of Butler's talent. And so I think that's kind of where this stems from, is that you see things differently because there was some different level of activity without Jimmy on the floor. Plus, they were able to get a win. Having said all that, most of, I think, Miami's success in that game against Minnesota was built off of their defense. And with Jimmy in the lineup, you're not gonna lose out in that regard. So I think they did a great job defensively. Their zone defense was fantastic. They were able to hold Anthony Edwards at just 22 points, keep him from shooting above 35%. So all those things were important factors in being able to eke out a win. It was just a 1-point win, and they did have to rely on Niko Jovic's tough layup almost at the buzzer there in order to get it done. So I don't know that it's a guarantee that without Jimmy, this team plays better. Maybe they play a little differently. I still think that with Jimmy in the lineup, that's your best chance at success. Although, again, I will say that I think there were stylistic differences that you could definitely point to without Jimmy on the floor.
So let's start there with the stylistic differences, because I think that's an interesting place to start. I mean, you look at the box score and it doesn't look different, right? They only got up 31 three-point attempts, right? They didn't out-rebound Minnesota. They didn't score a ton of points, only 95 points in this game on 77 shot attempts. They did record 14 steals in this game. And Minnesota turned the ball over 20 times against them. These are all kind of the same markers that are there with a Jimmy Butler team, right? We're a little bit lower on the three-point shooting volume, creating turnovers, dragged the game into the mud. Obviously, final score 95-94, no team crossing over 100 points. So I don't know. You look at the box score and you're like, is it stylistically different or is it almost exactly the same? But then I agree with you. Watching the game, it did feel like a little bit different. And I think maybe it's a little bit of you just don't notice Jimmy Butler out there because obviously he's not out there. You don't notice him out there just taking up space for the first three quarters, where it just tends to be his thing is, let me just kind of be a little bit passive for the first three quarters, and then I'll kick it into overdrive in the fourth quarter. And I suppose that was Nikola Jovic's job on Sunday. But that was the thing to me. It was just nobody looking at Jimmy Butler wondering when he was going to start playing like Jimmy Butler. And I do think that there is a freedom for the rest of the team in that way. It's, you know what, Tyler? Just shoot as much as you want. Bam, do everything you got to do. You're the leader of the team. There's no question about that. Haywood Highsmith, go out there and be a starter and get 5 steals on your own, right? You do your own little Jimmy Butler impression on the defensive end. So, I think there is maybe of freedom that comes along with that. That said, you see that across the NBA like all the time. Yeah. A star player goes out and all of a sudden everybody just feels a little bit more free to play the way that they want to play because you're not really being dictated by the way the star wants to play. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing, right? It's sort of what Bill Simmons has the Ewing theory, kind of named it after them. The problem with that is it expires. There's a very short expiration date on something like that, where you get a little bit of pep in your step at first, and you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. We're playing a little bit different. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, we're actually missing the best player on our team, and that's a problem. And eventually that will settle in. So one win is one win. It's a good win. It's whatever. But one win, you can't start making conclusions based off of that. Now, in terms of whether or not the Heat should trade Jimmy Butler, if they should start looking for them, I think that's totally a fair conversation to be having right now, considering the body of work so far this year has been underwhelming, right? Like Jimmy Butler's numbers across the board are down. And everybody thought, okay, contract year Jimmy Butler, he's going to come out motivated and everything like that. And I kept cautioning people, just because you want to doesn't mean you can. And he's 35 years old. And he's looking like he's 35 years old this season, maybe more than ever, other than times last year where he just seemed even a little bit more disinterested. But you can't deny the numbers so far down across the board. And it's not exactly like he's been helping them beat good teams either.
Right. No, I think that's certainly the point, is that he's put up decent numbers against poor teams in Miami's wins, but against those playoff teams from the previous season, his production has been kind of, as you said, underwhelming. And I think that's a fair point, because if he's not helping you beat those good teams, well, then what's the point? You know, if you're going to be paying him that salary and contributing and having him expect to be on that roster and be productive, that needs to happen against those better teams, or else, you know, you might as well just go and kind of lean into it. This was another comment that a lot of people sent in was, you know, lean into the youth movement. You lean into the younger players on this roster. I'm not sure that I'm ready to go there. Certainly the team is not. I think with Jimmy on the floor, there are expectations that you have to kind of work through him and incorporate him in some way. I don't know that you can explore a trade at this point. I really don't. I see what we're all saying here. I understand it's a valid point. I just don't think that you're going to get the kind of value a lot of people expect. I mean, there were people commenting trade Giannis for Jimmy. It's like, okay, why in the hell would Milwaukee even consider that possibility? No, so that's not realistic. Yeah. You're not. I don't even know what you'd get for Jimmy Butler realistically at this point. I don't know.
You would get a lot less than the Golden State. Yeah, you would be taking a loss on the asset for sure.
So, given that, it just seems like you're kind of stuck, and as such, then you just have to accept Jimmy's game, warts and all.
Well, do you?
And
I mean,
what's the alternative?
And then hope that you get like the playoff Jimmy type thing.
Yes.
So let's say Jimmy Butler is playoff Jimmy, and he goes out there and scores 36 points a night in the playoffs.
You're right.
Hypothetically, is this team still beating Boston? No. I think even if you're getting 36 points from Jimmy Butler, this team is so far away from Boston that, yeah, maybe you could bank on an injury here or there, like, or maybe something like that happens and you get lucky. But I almost like wouldn't want to win the championship getting lucky that way and just having like this false banner. No. Like, I want to be the best team. No. Like, you want to feel like you're the best team. And right now, this team feels so far from being the best team in the NBA, or even close to it. They're not even in that conversation. And so, yes, if you trade, like hypothetically, if you traded Jimmy Butler, you would be taking a loss on the asset, 100%. However, I would say this. In the new CBA, there is value in just not paying Jimmy Butler next year. And this is the thing that everybody keeps forgetting with Jimmy, is he still has not opted out of that $52.4 million contract next year. And the way he is playing, and the reason I bring up his numbers being down, is at this point, why would he?
Right.
Why on earth would he? That's a lot of money to say no to when your numbers are declining, right? And you could say, oh, you get us a longer-term contract some other time. Who cares? Collect that. How many more contracts would it take him? How many more salaries, yearly salaries, would it take him to make up $52.4 million the way he's playing now? You're going to pay him what? $25 million a year? Maybe. Another team, if they can clear out that kind of space, because the only team that would be willing to pay Jimmy Butler at all is a team that's like kind of looking for that maybe extra piece, and those teams tend to be pretty close to the salary cap. So I don't know. Like, let's just hypothetically say 20, 25 million. That's still 2 years that you have to make up to even get close to what you're giving up in 1 year. So it doesn't make any financial sense. It's like, hey, kick the can down the road for one more summer, collect your $52 million, and then sign like a $20 million deal for 2-3 years and then retire or whatever it's going to be. But I think if you're the Heat, that's my worry is, oh, this dude's just going to opt back in. And then we're going to be doing this whole song and dance for another year, and it's only going to look worse because he's going to be a year older. And so before Milwaukee decides to blow it up and make Giannis available, Damian Lillard available, whoever else might shake loose, I think the Heat might have to act with some sort of sense of urgency if they come to the conclusion that, hey, we're not good enough, and we can't afford to not be good enough again next year, because if Jimmy opts in, that's exactly what we're going to be.
But what are the options? Again, I mean, they're acting with a sense of urgency.
Trade him for one young player. Like, if you can get Houston to bite on a Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, Cam Whitmore package, or just one of those young, if you can get one of those Houston young guys, I think you would almost have to do it.
I don't think Houston's interested at this point. I think they've shown that they can win and be good enough without him. And I think they feel like there's probably enough there. Sure. I mean, again,
or they're waiting for Kevin Durant or Giannis because they have all these assets. But if you're Houston, you could be like, well, we're not, if you're the Heat, you can't even ask for all this stuff. You can say, hey, you could keep all your draft picks. We're going to give you Jimmy Butler for just one of these young players. We're going to clean up your depth chart a little bit. And you're still going to have all your powder dry for Kevin Durant or Giannis when those guys become available, if they become available, which, by the way, with what's going on in Phoenix right now, it doesn't look like Kevin Durant's getting traded anytime soon. But yeah.
Right. So I don't, like, I feel we could probably have the conversation at some point if Miami waited too long to trade Jimmy Butler. But I understand the approach was, let's just see if they can stay healthy, and let's see if this team can continue to be as competitive as they have been in seasons past and maybe make another push, et cetera. And obviously the jury's still out. We have no idea what they're going to be capable of throughout the rest of the regular season. They show flashes, they show tendencies, they show stagnant tendencies. So there is certainly warts to this team that we're not sure, and I don't think anybody is sure whether or not they're able to overcome. But I think they'll still wait until the end of the season. And at that point, as you said, they're going to probably be stuck with that version of Jimmy Butler, whether he shows up in the playoffs or not, because I agree with you. I don't see any reason why he would opt out unless he's made it clear and he has the kind of self-awareness that we have never seen at the NBA level, which is, you know what? I realize I'm not $52 million good enough anymore, but I want to stay in Miami just because I like it, because I like Big Face Coffee, because I like the freedom it allows me, and I'm comfortable in this franchise, and I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't want to mess up my family life, etc. I'm just going to opt out and sign for 3 years, $75 million.
I wouldn't rule it out. You know, you don't know. You don't know what's available to him. Like, if maybe there's that deal isn't out. I don't know. You can't rule anything out with Jimmy. You never know. That guy's full of surprises. But
I will say, to counter your point about wanting to be the best team, how did 2011 feel? Because I know that Miami was the best team and they didn't win the championship, and you walked out of there after having lost to Dallas.
Felt awful.
Not feeling that great. Yeah.
It felt awful. But at the same time,
being the best team and winning the championship are two different things.
I guess, but I don't want like the fluky championship where you just like go on a run.
Take it.
And I don't know. I want to feel like the best team. Like I want to feel good about the team all season long. That was like the weird thing about 2023 is like that team was miserable to watch all regular season. Like that wasn't a fun season. It was an amazing. That playoff run was magical. It was an amazing playoff run. It really was. It did kind of make up for it, but still, like, you just want to be the best. Whatever. We're gonna move on. Do the Heat need to make a permanent change to the starting lineup? They might have to. It might not be what you think it needs to be. We'll tell you what it is after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again, because with Mint Mobile says it's $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. That's what they mean. They mean it. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected charges. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's MINT, mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required, the equivalent of $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions do apply. See Mint Mobile for details. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. The best way to support the show is to like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're almost at 15,000 subscribers on YouTube. Let's get there. Let's get there before the end of the month. The Heat play the Pistons tonight in their first NBA Cup game. The NBA Cup is what used to be called the end season tournament, but now they got a sponsor. It's like Emirates or something. So good for them.
Yep.
Which we knew this was coming. But before we talk about some of the NBA Cup lessons from last year and get a quick refresher on the format so that we can all keep up starting tonight, they switched up, Miami Heat did, their starting lineup against Minnesota over the weekend. Instead of Nikola Jovic, they bench Jovic. They start Kevin Love in his first action of the season alongside Bam Adebayo, and then Haywood Highsmith takes Jimmy Butler's spot in the lineup while Jimmy Butler is sidelined with the right ankle sprain. How should they come out tonight, David?
That is an interesting question. Obviously, no Jimmy Butler. I think you leave Haywood Highsmith definitely in the lineup. My concern is that at that forward spot, I don't know that Kevin Love at this point is capable of guarding Tobias Harris and kind of keeping him from doing what he's kind of chips away. Like he finds a way to be a factor against Miami, and I'm not so sure that you can afford to have Love out there. But if you're going to monitor his minutes or keep him close the way they did, because I know he was on a minutes restriction, etc., I think it could still work. I did like Kevin's minutes. I don't know if you got a chance to watch the game, but I think in his minutes out there, he only played a total of 13 minutes. I thought he was impactful, hit a three, had that nice outlet pass, the rebounding, the leadership. This is the general floor understanding that you don't get with Niko Jovic, because despite all the talent that Nico has, he's still a young player and he's still kind of, is a little out of it at times. I think you don't necessarily get that as much with Kevin, and I think it might work. So my thought process is probably going to roll out the exact same lineup that we saw.
So did they start Kevin Love because Minnesota just plays bigger, right? So they had Kevin Love start against Rudy Gobert to start that game, and then you had Bam Adebayo guarding Julius Randle, and that made a lot of intuitive sense. And I agree with you. I thought it worked out pretty well to start the game. The Pistons play smaller, right? They're not as big as Minnesota's front line. Tobias Harris is, just a forward-sized power forward. They're really the only big that they really play is Jalen Duren in that starting lineup. Isaiah Stewart comes off the bench, but he's kind of had an up and down start of the
season. Duren's out, isn't he? I thought isn't Duren out for the game?
Good call. So I guess Jalen Duren is out. I should probably look up the injury report before I start talking about stuff. But so yeah, even more of a reason not to go big. So I could actually see. Jalen Duren is questionable with an ankle sprain, and Isaiah Stewart is probable, so they might not have any of their centers. But so maybe if you're Miami, look, the starting lineup wasn't working, right? With Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jovic, Bam, Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero. It was not working. It was getting outscored, and that's bad news for a starting lineup. I understand that Eric Spoelstra wants a consistent starting lineup, especially after last year where there wasn't a consistent starting lineup. I'm wondering if it's too much of an overcorrection at this point, where you're sticking with something, even though it's clearly not working, but you're sticking with it just to stick with it, right? And assuming, okay, maybe they'll get some chemistry and all this stuff, and it'll be better by the end of the season than it is now, and certainly that's possible. But I do wonder if it's a little bit of an overcorrection here, where if the Heat are trying to create some sort of advantage with the starting lineup, and Eric Spoelstra is always talking about how versatile they are, and there's not really a clear fifth starter, why not just switch up that fifth starter every other night and just be unpredictable? And you see something similar working right now in Oklahoma City, where they're always swapping out that fifth starter. You could toggle between Kevin Love, Nikola Jovic, Haywood Highsmith when Jimmy Butler is back and healthy, Jaime Jaquez Jr. You could start him some nights. And I understand that creates some issues in terms of your rotation and what people are expecting and whatever, but that second unit is just sort of already up in the air a lot. It's Thomas Bryant, and then it's Khalil Ware, and sometimes Alec Burks plays, sometimes it's Pelle Larson, sometimes Haywood Highsmith doesn't get any minutes. Like that second unit's up in the air anyway. And so I don't know. I'm not dug into this opinion, but part of me wonders
right,
just switch it up every night based on the matchup. And if it's against Detroit, I might start Jaime and Haywood and just bring Jovic and Kevin Love off the bench and just go out there and put your scorers out there because you're not really worried about their size.
I agree 100%. I mean, I think that's the approach. I said what I thought Spo would do. That's not what I would necessarily do. I think Jaime going out there, he can match up with Harris. He can match up with Tim Hardaway Jr. Like that wouldn't be a problem. He'll find a way to get his points, although I think he's still struggling a little bit. I mentioned in the last show that, obviously the stomach issues that affected him in Mexico City are still pretty prevalent. He just didn't look like he had the same pep, and it was a little bit more predictable on his drives and spins towards the hoop. Hopefully he's a little bit better now after a couple more days of rest and getting better into shape, etc. So I think that's the better lineup. I really do. I think if you're looking for more balance, then you could probably make a strong case for Jaime getting more playing time over Niko Jovic in that starting lineup. I think Haywood's a must, though, because I think he can match up with Harris and limit him. He can switch, obviously. He could pick up Duren if Bam winds up getting the switch somehow. So I think there are enough options there with Haywood out there and the versatility he provides defensively, where he's probably still the better option, especially if Terry Rozier is going to continue to be the starter. So I guess we'll see what happens with Spo. Obviously, he's going to hold that, in a Brinks truck and make sure nobody finds out that starting lineup until seconds before the game actually starts. But at the same time,
it does go hand in hand with what Spo likes to do, which is not reveal anything. And it would kind of all go together. He would get back into sort of being that unpredictable thing that he likes to do.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. So, I mean, yeah, you think Jaime is a better option to start if Spo does wind up making a change?
Yeah, I think Nico's fourth quarter was really good against Minnesota, yes, but I don't think he did anything that earns his way back into that starting lineup, especially, and this is my whole, like, hey, this is why we can't have nice things. Like, a guy does really well, and they're like, all right, immediately promote him again. And it's like, well, it didn't work in the starting lineup. Just leave him in that role that was working. And so I'd be fine with Nico coming off the bench again. And then, yeah, giving the Jaime, Haywood, Terry, Tyler, Bam lineup a spin. And defensively, there's concerns there, right? You have 2 good defenders and 3 not so good defenders in that starting lineup. But that's been the case, basically. Like, Kevin Love at least provided some size against Minnesota, but he's not a plus defender by any stretch. But maybe that's the way to go. And by the way, some nights, throw Khalil Ware a start. Throw him out there. Put Bam at power forward. Like, I think if you're being unpredictable, these are sort of the things that are opened up for you. And it doesn't hurt to keep trying things. The more I think about it, the more I think this is how the Heat should play it. Just because there's not an obvious starting 5 that works, or even a closing 5, right? When Jaime Jaquez was closing games in Nikola Jovic's places, it wasn't like that thing was burning the doors off of these things. So it was, I don't know. They don't really have a great 5-man group, so you got to try to create some kind of advantage somewhere, and maybe that is an unpredictability type thing.
I like the idea of Nico, Love, and Ware sharing the floor. I don't think we've seen that lineup, and that's a good size. I think Nico can play towards his strengths at the 3, etc. Love,
like with all of them coming off the bench, you mean?
Yes. All of them coming off the bench, alongside, I guess it would be Pella, and I can't.
I don't know, the guards or something like that. Duncan,
Alec Burks probably. Duncan. Yeah, absolutely needs to play out there. So I guess Pella would be your kind of de facto point guard, although Nico would bring the ball up. Kevin Love certainly with his outlet passing. So I don't know if that's enough ball handling necessarily, but I think it still kind of provides a nice balance to your backup unit there. Duncan has been playing much better of late. It's interesting. Do you think Ware did enough to earn more playing time moving forward? Because I know a lot of people saw his 9 minutes of play and were pretty enthusiastic about it after he provided 3 blocks, and he did have that long jumper that was ruled a 2, although he thought he had a foot on the line. So do you think he's done enough now so he can be the backup center?
Yeah. I don't know that he's done enough. I just don't think playing Thomas Bryant as the backup makes a ton of sense unless you feel really strongly about some sort of backup matchup that's involved there. But you got to throw Khalil Ware out there at this point. Just see what he can do, and hopefully he'll be better than he is now by the end of the season. And the only way he's going to get better, and on that timeline, by the way, is to be out there playing, right? I think there's a certain amount that he can do behind the scenes in practice, but teams just don't practice the way they used to anymore. There's not a whole lot of those practices going around. Shoot around isn't going to give you much in terms of development. And then there's not really a point in putting him in the G League either, because he would just dominate the way he dominated Summer League, because there's no true centers in the G League. Didn't that Jay Huff guy, he plays for the Grizzlies, didn't he win like Defensive Player of the Year in the G League? He's not a good defender. Yeah, I think he won Defensive Player of the Year in the G League. It's just like, that's the bar we're talking about in terms of centers in the G League. You're not going to learn anything, in other words. So I think at this point, you get him out there for the 9-10 minutes.
I love his story, though. Come on, that's a good.
Oh yeah, it's a great story.
That's a great story. Yeah,
it's a great story. I'm happy for that guy. All right, what can the Heat learn about their big mistake in last season's NBA Cup group stage performance? The group stage gets kicked off tonight in Detroit for the Miami Heat. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. If you were watching that Dolphins game last night, you probably wanted to make a wager. I'm not sure in what regard you'd want to, but there was a lot to like there. They eventually got the win, and looks like they're already favored for next week's game against the Las Vegas Raiders.
7.5 point favorites against the Raiders at home. Jason Sanders, MVP of the Monday Night Football game.
Oh,
Tyreek Hill getting the ball in space again, finally. If they can get Jalen Waddle to catch some passes here. I don't know. Like, what did the broadcast say? They got to win 7 of their next 9 to even have a chance at the playoffs, a wild card?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they need one of these guys to step up, but A-Chain looks great too, man.
Yeah, he does. He had some big runs there. Although the helmet still continues to confound.
He looks like a Pee Wee football player out there.
I like it. You certainly know you can identify him pretty easily out there when he's got that helmet guard. So, and if he feels comfortable, that's all that really matters. Let's destigmatize the use. Yeah, exactly. The use of the concussion helmet. So when you get a hunch in the middle game, sometimes you don't want to check out the latest stats or you want to view live play-by-play from around the league. Well, you can do that and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets, but only if you visit FanDuel.com and join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. The NBA Cup tips off tonight across the league with our first round of group stage games. So the Heat really botched things last year in the NBA Cup. I'll tell you what they got wrong here in a second. But before we get all that, just a quick refresher on what exactly is the NBA Cup, because I don't think that the NBA or NBA media did a particularly great job last year of explaining what was going on. But that, it was the first year, and we're learning as we go here.
We did a great job of it.
We did a great job, and we're going to continue to do it. So Miami's NBA Cup schedule. So it's the group stage, and this is the group stage before the knockout stage, the knockout stage before you get to Las Vegas and start playing championship games. But in terms of the group stage, it works very similar to European soccer, where Miami plays Detroit tonight. They're in a group with the Pistons, the Pacers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Toronto Raptors. They're going to play one of these group stage games once a week on either a Tuesday or a Friday, right? All group stage games across the NBA are Tuesdays and Fridays. You play one a week between now and the end of November, first week of December. And then after that, your records and your point differentials and all that stuff is added up, and then that determines the knockout round, okay? So the Heat did not advance out of their group stage last year. Only 8 teams are going to advance to the knockout round. The Heat went 4-2 in their group last year, but so did Milwaukee and so did New York. Okay? The reason the Heat didn't advance is because they only won because tiebreakers are based on point differential, and they only won their group stage games by a total of 4 points. Milwaukee was plus 46, and New York was plus 42, and both of those teams moved on. So I think that's part of these games, and it's an interesting part too, because in theory, these games, even if they're blowouts, every minute still matters as the game goes on, because if you're blowing out a team by 20 points, but in the last 3 minutes of that game, that your opponent cuts that lead to 10 points, you still get the win, but you get half the point differential sort of towards that point differential, and you can end up not advancing because of that, which kind of happened to Miami in one of those games where they kind of gave up a lead late, and they ended up only winning their groups by 4 points. Easier said than done, obviously, but it is something that the Heat have to consider is, hey, once you put your foot on the gas, you got to leave it there for all 48 minutes. And it does sort of run counter to, and this sparked debate, like, is this sportsmanlike and all this stuff? Hey, if it's in the rules, it's sportsmanlike, and these are the rules. So it is a little bit of an interesting format here.
Yes, and at the same time, like, that's been Miami issue, whether it's the in-season tournament or not. Like, they can't keep their foot on the gas for 4 quarters. We saw that against Minnesota. We've seen that consistently all season. We've seen that for multiple seasons. We've talked about it a lot. The third quarter woes are realistic, and they're there. So if you're looking at a team and you're looking at Miami and you're saying, oh, that they have a chance perhaps as Milwaukee continues to struggle, as Toronto leans into rebuilding, et cetera. maybe they might have a chance against Indiana, Detroit, etc. Not really. I'm not too optimistic because my feeling is that you're just not going to be able to dominate games and be able to have those blowout wins. All those teams are going to be competitive. Like, you're not going to blow out Indiana, because if there's one thing Indiana can do, it's put up some points. Maybe they won't be able to defend as well, but Miami's issue is more on the scoring side than anything else, and being able to keep that lead consistently all game long. Detroit, similarly, they're a better team than they were last year. Yes, they're very competitive. I think they're going to be a matchup problem for Miami. It's kind of probably the same way. A close game. Yeah,
Toronto's just Detroit, Canada, right? It's they're into every one of these games, like Grady Dick and RJ Barrett combining for 45 points a night, but they keep losing
by 5.
Right, exactly. So I think I agree with you. Counting on the Heat to blow these teams out, not going to happen, because they never do. And so for them to be able to do it in these games, just I don't know where that would come from. Miami's best case scenario is that their group is really weak. Right? Yeah. Like Milwaukee and Indiana were supposed to be the top 2 teams in this group, plus Miami is sort of that middle team, and then Detroit and Toronto, which obviously didn't make the playoffs last year. And the Milwaukee Bucks are falling apart, right? Damian Lillard might be out for, I don't know how, like, he's dealing with a concussion from the weekend. I mean, Miami doesn't play Milwaukee until November 26th, so hopefully Damian Lillard will be back by then, just because of his health. But they've not been good. They've been aggressively bad. And so they're not the team that you thought they were going to be coming into this season. So really the only good team, like the solid good team you feel about in Miami's group, is the Indiana Pacers. And they still feel a little up and down this year. So Miami's best case scenario is that point differential doesn't even come into play, because there's no tiebreakers, because Miami just won the group outright. Like, if Miami goes 5-1 in group stage games, is that even how it works? No. Group stage is just these 4 games. And then it's 2 more games after this, I think. I'm confused.
So the Indiana games up this weekend, are those towards the Cup?
One of them is. The Friday one
is. Okay, that's right. The Friday matchup. Yeah, okay.
So if they just win the group outright, with 1 loss, then you advance, and then the tiebreaker doesn't even come into play. So that would be Miami's goal, I think, is just, hey, let's just win these games outright and just hope that the point differential doesn't come into play. But you can't afford to lose one of these games that you're not supposed to lose in general, because obviously all these games are still embedded within the regular season schedule. They count towards the regular season standings, not just the NBA Cup standings. So you already couldn't afford to lose to Detroit, Toronto, heck, even Milwaukee at home on TNT. You can't really afford to lose that game. So
absolutely not.
You got to split one of these games in Indiana. You can't lose 2 of them, because it's a Wednesday and then a Friday. And so hopefully if you're going to lose one of them, drop the one that's not the NBA Cup game, I suppose, if you had to pick. Although I'm aware that it does not work that way. But just you got to win the group outright, because I agree with you 100%. You're not going to win the point differential thing. You could even win this group outright and still have not the best point differential in the group. It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I'm excited though. We talked about this last year. There's been a lot of criticism of the league of late, and the criticism of the media for being critical of the league and everything else like that. And even the tournament last year did not generate, at first, I think, the kind of response a lot of people wanted it to, especially at the NBA office level. But in terms of what we saw and covering the tournament and going to the games, etc., it wound up being far more exciting. Like, you could sense something palpable about competing for something and playing for something. Like, there was a goal beyond just getting a regular season win, which obviously always matters, but there was something beyond that, and you could sense it not just as a media member, but as a fan and from the players. And you could tell that they were engaged, that they wanted to win these games. And so I'm excited to see if they have the same kind of approach this year, and how the Miami team responds to being part of this tournament, whether or not they see something at stake and want to continue to find a way to win and perhaps win this whole tournament, because that would be, I think, exciting for fans to see.
It would be cool. And you kind of have to make that conscious decision as NBA media, people who cover this, is, am I going to just make fun of this whole thing, which is certainly an angle, and it's an angle a lot of people take, and it's a fine angle to take, or am I going to embrace it for whatever this thing is, because it doesn't seem to be going away, especially because they have a multi-year sponsorship deal with Emirates. So this is just going to be here, and it might be tweaked a little bit here and there, but it's going to be here. And so do you just embrace it and try to make the most? Yeah. And so I've sort of decided, you know what, fun is always better than not having fun. I try to be a fun kind of guy. I'm not sure I always accomplish that, but when I have a chance to just make that decision to be fun, let's have a little bit of fun. That said, if they lose one of these NBA Cup games, I'm going to talk about how stupid this whole thing is. If they lose, but that's for the future potentially. So also, not to bury the lead, that's why all the courts look different, people.
Yeah, I think we know.
And so it's not going to be the walking on lava thing from last year where it was like a bright red. It's going to be, I think, a much better court this year where it's more of just like a bright yellow, a little bit easier on the eyes. Yellow is closer to like a wood color anyway, so it looks a little bit less weird. Like it just looked like they were playing in like one of like the 7 rings of hell last season. And did I get the amount of rings right, by the way?
I don't know. I haven't read Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno, right? Yeah. I don't know. That's what it looked like last year. So now I'm kind of glad that they just have like a normal, at least not normal, but normaler looking court, and that goes for across the rest of the league. They tampered down. They tampered down the rest of the courts a little bit across the league, which I think is a good thing. So
yes, it is.
Heat played Detroit tonight in the first NBA Cup game. Of course, we will be back tonight with our reaction immediately after the game. For now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.